And just as important, media reform, as well as other issues of the day, of course. David Coleman, Liberal MP, appreciate your time.
Good to be here, Peter.
All right, you wrote this article today in The Australian. Let's start with this before we get to some of the issues of the day. Media reform, you're arguing that the reach rules, which basically limit companies to 75% reach, should be scrapped. We don't need that because you've effectively got regulation to cover it anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And if it was part of a broader, media reform package, I think this is an important issue. Basically, at the moment, the arguments for the reach rule are that it protects local content. It doesn't actually do that because local content is protected by a completely different set of regulations. So regardless of who owns a network, they're bound by those local content rules. And the other argument is that it stops the big networks 9, 7 and 10 getting their reach into the regions.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. Is your theory, because you're a former director at 9, that's obviously disclosed in the piece. Yeah. Let me ask you this though: is the argument that in the battle of free-to-air TV, which is media is becoming that much harder, whether it's newspapers, free-to-air, frankly Foxtel as well, is your argument that this just gives them an opportunity to be able to become more economically viable, and there are regulations in place, as you say in the article, to protect local content? Yeah,
well, that's right. The media industry is changing and local content is protected anyway. And the other point is 9, 7 and 10's content is already reaching 100% of the population because through the output deals with the regional networks, Laurie Oakes is seen on WIN all around the country. So the reach rule isn't stopping the networks from...
But how would it work? I mean, because things like Prime, Southern Cross and WIN, do they have to be bought out? Is that the theory, or could they be competed with?
Well, either one. There's no rule that says what the particular structure would have to be.
Obviously, but they just get crushed if they were to be competed with, wouldn't they? I mean, if 9, 7 and 10 could just go in there, they're too big, aren't they? They just
you need the regional licence though. So those licences are currently held by the regional networks.
Okay.
It might lead to some mergers between those networks. But the key point is the local content is protected regardless of who the owner is, and 9, 7 and 10's content is already reaching 100% of the country anyway. So the rule isn't actually achieving a great deal.
Foxtel's always interested in his anti-siphoning laws. I mean, would you extend, if you like, winding back these command and control structures in media reform to that sort of area as well, or do you think that's a different case?
Yeah, I think that's a different matter. I mean, the two issues I feel strongly about are the reach rule and also the 2 out of 3 rule that prohibits one company from owning newspapers, TV and radio.
Well, if the government gets its way, that's likely to go. I think Malcolm Turnbull suggested that.
Well, look, and again, it's an ongoing process, but look, I mean, the newspaper industry is, as you know, is under immense difficulty, and it's ironic on the one hand that we've got an industry that is, on its knees around the world, but on the other hand, a regulation that says it's so powerful that it can't merge with other sectors. So I think as the impact of the internet just continues to roll out, that as part of any broader package, it should be strongly considered.
I mean, this is a commentary question, but indulge me if you can. You're on the backbench. You're allowed to comment to some extent. What is the government going to get any love from the opposition? Do you think the Greens, the crossbenchers on this? I can't imagine PUP, for example, being particularly interested in changing the 2 out of 3 rule, given what it might do for an organisation like News Corp.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, Peter, and that's what you get paid the big bucks for, to work out that stuff. But
you used to be in the industry. Come on, you can't get out of it that easily.
No. Look, I genuinely don't know what the views of the minor parties would be, but I think as part of an orderly discussion of media reform, in contrast to what you'll remember what Labor did last year, which was a complete debacle.
I think almost everyone within the Labor Party, other than Stephen Conroy, agrees with that.
Right, and the sort of proposal of government regulator of press content was scary to say the least. So in contrast to that, we're working through it in a methodical fashion, and I think there are a couple of important issues that are in the mix.
Just getting back to the reach rules, you talk about the regulations from 2004 that command for local content, and that being a safeguard. Presumably, though, that's regulations. The reach rules as they exist are legislative. Is the argument perhaps that regulations are easier to change than legislation, so that's why people might balk at your idea?
But there's no proposal to change the local content rules.
But my point, though, is that if that's next step, is it easier to do that once you get the legislation out of the way?
Well, look, it certainly wouldn't be something that I would advocate, and I don't think anyone's suggesting it. It's important that those local content rules are there, and and they are. The local content rules, by the way, a lot of the Prime and Win in particular distribute far more regional. Local content is actually required under the rules. So the rules are there as a good safeguard. There's also an economic imperative if you own a regional network to get good regional content out there, because that's what people want to watch. So I think that, you know, this rule, the reach rule, doesn't achieve a great deal, and I don't think viewers would really see any practical impact if it was changed.
Politics of the day. Are you entirely comfortable with the government's approach so far to the escalation, I suppose you'd call it, of our reaction to what's going on in the Middle East?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that...
Have you been informed as a backbencher? I mean, often I've had other backbenchers complain that they feel like there's not enough information provided, that government is very much, more than ever, an executive arm of government. Is the backbench being consulted on the way through?
I have no concerns at all in that regard, Peter, and I think you know, the issue here is that we have a terrorist army. This is not something that we've really seen before. I mean, you know, ISIL, its destructive capacity, it actually exceeds Al Qaeda in terms of what it has done, the murderous activities it's completed in a short period of time. So I think we definitely need to err on the side of strength and resolve, and I think we're doing absolutely the right thing.
See, I'm broadly in favour of it. I did make a comment earlier in the program, though, that you wouldn't have seen, where my only concern, and this is more one that relates to the US, but then Australia's part of it because we're involved, we're not necessarily getting enough guarantees from Middle Eastern nations, which should have those guarantees extracted before the West jumps in. Now, arguably, the West has taken too long to jump in with the escalation of this over the last couple of years. But having decided to now go in, I feel like more perhaps could have been done to get guarantees from those nations.
I think we are seeing, you know, commitments from, you know, Jordan and Saudi Arabia and various other nations in the region. So I think this is not by any means a Western coalition. This is a coalition against an evil and murderous horde. Yeah, we should be getting as many nations involved in that fight as we can.
Final question, I can't let you go. You're a marginal seat MP. You're one of the guys with your seat right on the line. It's not your fault. Your frontbenchers, they're not doing a great job selling the budget. They're getting themselves into knots and twists over 18C. Putting someone like your seat on the line, you gave up a very good job to go into politics. You must be annoyed.
Not at all, Peter. No, look, I think...
Come on, be honest.
No, Peter, look, I don't think that's a fair characterisation at all. You know, the vast majority of people in my electorate know that we've got to fix the budget mess. They absolutely accept that. They know we can't just sort of, you know, sleepwalk into the future. And
so you're confident you can turn it around because you're down in the polls.
Oh, look, I'm very confident that people will respect a government that takes on the hard issues and does what the country needs, and that's what we're doing.
All right, David Coleman, always appreciate your contribution. Thanks very much.
Thanks.